From last night's budget, one of the biggest talking points is how the Reserve Bank will interpret it. Let's bring in our business editor, Ross Greenwood, here now. Ross, good morning. The suggestion is the Treasurer is deliberately handing out subsidies for energy to get inflation lower. That puts pressure on the RBA to cut rates.
That's right, and it's not as though it's the first government ever to put pressure on the Reserve Bank to try and move rates the way it would like them to move. But of course, because it's targeted in particular rental assistance and also energy, it's two of those things that are in the basket of the consumer price index that is keeping inflation stubbornly high, which led to the Reserve Bank at its last meeting saying that it was considering even raising interest rates in Australia, when the conventional wisdom was that by about September to November this year, it would have started cutting interest rates as our economy weakened. So you can see this in the long-term trends of inflation. Say, for example, really they have shown the trend that inflation hasn't come back to the 2 to 3% band, but the Treasury says it will now. And the other thing also is if we go even further forward, you can see that even interest rates here in Australia as a result, and now even though they've come, that they have probably peaked, the fact of the matter is that they're, and right now, not coming down in the way in which maybe the government would like them to. Again, a little suggestion around the place was also that the government would have probably waited for an interest rate cut from the Reserve Bank, maybe two, and then announced an election saying we're the party that's bringing interest rates down. Well, now, with the budget suggesting the first rate cut will not be until the middle of next year, it probably doesn't have that option.
OK, but if Jim Chalmers is right and inflation, the CPI falls, why wouldn't the RBA cut rates?
Well, the reason is because the Reserve Bank, say when fruit and vegetable prices go up because of seasonal factors, it looks through those one-off inflationary effects. And so therefore, say for example, if the energy prices come down artificially because of government subsidy, but then eventually going to rise because that subsidy ends, then ultimately they will look through that. Now, there's something else that's important here, and that is fundamentally different views of the economy from Treasury, therefore the federal budget last night, and from the Reserve Bank. And you can see this in key areas. So economic growth, say, for example, they have fundamentally different views about where economic growth will be. The Reserve Bank thinks it will be stronger and Treasury thinks it will be weaker, again leading to the suggestion that rates should be cut. Then on top of that, even the inflation forecast, you can see there that really it's a situation where, again, Treasury thinks that inflation is going to fall back to the 2 to 3% band, and Jim Chalmers has said maybe even by this year. And then on the other hand, the Reserve Bank does not think that the inflation rate is going to fall anywhere near as fast. And those fundamentally different views about the economy and inflation also do bear out in those interest rate settings into the future as well. And you can see even here, June next year, where the two have got their interest rate forecasts as well.
But will all this work, Ross? After all, the Treasurer is trying to say that the government will spend an extra $9 billion this year, more into the future, plus the tax cuts, but it won't add to inflation. I feel like that's a bit of a stretch.
A bit of a stretch, absolutely a bit of a stretch. Now, though not all that $9 billion is directly inflationary, the reality is that much of it is. And so as a result of this, this is a government that goes from budget surplus to very significant budget deficits because it's borrowing money and putting money into programs that may be very essential for Australia, but still it's additional spending. And so therefore, with the tax cuts on top, to suggest that inflation is not going to come down and people are not going to spend that money, that seems to me to be kind of fanciful. And so you can even see here, now this is one classic example, the Australian dollar. In the past week, and in fact overnight, you see it's jumped. And the reason it's jumped is because the markets are now suggesting that there is pressure on interest rates to rise here in Australia. So that is a classic one. And even bond yields here in Australia, again, suggestions that interest rates will ultimately rise. So the money markets right now are tipping that the inflation will not go away like the Treasurer says, and indeed the pressure will be on the Reserve Bank to think about rate rises in the future.
Yeah, I've got strong doubts about it all too. Ross, thank you.